Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epic Times. It's America's largest independent newspaper, I might add. Now, as always, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps get our show out to more people. Now, as we speak, there's a push to have citizenship verification for elections in the United States. And part of this effort, a very big effort, includes a controversial system that documents American citizens. Because how do you tell if someone's a citizen or not at the local level? You got to check it. To do that, you have to have a database. Now, this tool is going to work as a searchable database that can be used by election officials, but it's also raising concerns over, well, are they documenting Americans like that? NPR said this. It said the Trump administration has, for the first time ever, built a searchable national citizenship data system. The tool, which is being rolled out in phases, is designed to be used by state and local election officials to give them an easier way to ensure only citizens are voting. But they add it was developed rapidly without a public process, and some of those officials are already worrying about what else it could be used for. They note NPR is the first news organization to report the details of the new system. There were a lot of questions over what they were doing. They're giving some take on it. And they note for decades, voting officials have noted there was no national citizenship list to compare their state list to. So to verify citizenship for their voters, they either needed to ask people to provide a birth certificate or a passport, something that could disenfranchise millions, they say, because they say that voter ID is racist, or use a complex patchwork of disparate data sources. In other words, this is a way to create citizenship verification without a need for so-called voter ID. But they add that now the Department of Homeland Security is offering another way. DHS, in partnership with the White House's Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE team, has recently rolled out a series of upgrades to a network of federal databases to allow state and county officials, election officials, to quickly check the citizenship status of their entire voter list. Both U.S.-born and naturalized citizens using data from the Social Security Administration as well as immigration databases. And because they've been clearing up Social Security as well, it means basically, well, they can purge their voter rolls also potentially of illegal immigrants or non-U.S. citizens. And note this as well, such integration has never existed before. And experts call it a sea change that inches the U.S. closer to having a roster of citizens, something the country has never embraced. A centralized national database of Americans' personal information has long been considered a third rail, especially to privacy advocates as well as political conservatives, which we'll get into in a minute, who have traditionally opposed mass data consolidation by the federal government. And so what's going on with this? Well, the system they're talking about, this is Palantir. Many of you may have heard of it because there was a big controversy not too long ago about it. Reports were coming out, and even conservatives, they were questioning, why is the Trump administration making contracts with a third-party organization to create a database on Americans? What are they planning to do with this? Well, now we're getting a clearer picture of what the plan is. It's about creating a system that can help ensure that non-citizens are not voting in our elections. But the other concern is, well, what else could it be used for? Is it just going to be limited to that? Well, what if the Trump administration just uses it for this, but whoever becomes president next decides to use it for something different? Is it really different from having like a driver's license database or a passport database or a birth certificate database? Is it so much different? We don't really know. Democracy for Sale said this. They said this week, Democracy for Sale revealed how a secretive police unit is instructing forces across England, of all places, to withhold information about their contracts with Palantir, the shadowy U.S. firm founded by Trump donor Peter Thiel. For Palantir, this kind of secrecy is par for the course. We know what it does. Surveillance, they say, military tech, big data, but much less about how it does it. The company is Silicon Valley's closest thing to a black box. In other words, it's a third-party organization, and so we're limited on the ability of having oversight. which is one of the big arguments also on the conservative side, right? One of the arguments is when you create a public-private partnership, the private organization does not have the same scrutiny or the same level of transparency or the same level of being able to ask them what they're doing as you would a government agency. We've seen this with many things. A lot of the election systems are like this. You're not allowed to question them or you get sued. It's like this, for example, with even some of the some of the school books and so on, the textbooks. If you try to get them or request to find out what your kids are being taught, they'll tell you, this is copyright protected, we cannot give it to you. So parents are prevented from really seeing even the textbooks their kids are using in schools because a lot of it's digital now. And so the issue you have when you have a public-private partnership, well, the private entity is shielded from the normal types of transparency and FOIA requests and everything else that Americans are normally afforded when it comes to government oversight. It's a black box, as they say. And the other side of it, too, is, well, you're also not really allowed to question it the same way. The level of being able to challenge it or write about it even, it's a lot more difficult. Now, when it comes to this whole system of a alleged database on U.S. citizens, for now it's being used as a system to prevent non-U.S. citizens from voting on our elections. Democrats argue this is not a big enough issue to justify it. Conservatives argue that it is, or at the very least, if you bring in 20 million people, the risk of it being a problem is too high, and so you need something like this. Further down the line, there are also concerns it may be used for other things, though. Maybe a form of surveillance, maybe a social credit system. Some would argue, actually, that the banking systems and credit systems as they exist on the financial markets, they basically work like that already. But of course, there's no public-private partnership tying that into like a surveillance system. On that point, though, this also raises concerns over the nature of these types of partnerships because they also do something else, which is they let government agencies get around things that the Constitution would normally stop them from doing. We saw this, for example, with some of these systems for censorship. Government agencies were going through big tech, social networks. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg was revealing this. He was saying that government agencies were approaching him about censoring people. They could not directly demand there to be censorship, but he alleged that he believed it was pressure to censor. And so as they were carrying out acts of censoring American citizens from expressing their concerns during the COVID outbreak and things like that, it represented in some people's eyes a form of state censorship through other means, a violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution through kind of a backdoor approach. We've seen the same thing with state cooperation with third-party organizations that create databases on news websites that even go through other countries to do it. In other words, a hand-in-glove technique. The hand cannot violate this, but the glove can. So you put the hand in the glove, and the glove might fit this time, and then you can do things that you normally can't do. That is the concern with this. And so, now when it comes to, again, this database on American citizens, the argument is this a violation of illegal searches and seizures? That's the real concern with this. Under the U.S. Constitution, there needs to normally be, if they want to get data on you or search you or check you out or something like that, normally there needs to be a warrant for that. If there's warrantless spying, that is a concern. Other people would argue that even like airport security already does that. And for example, facial recognition systems that are already in place, they do that. And third-party organizations like social media websites where you have to submit your driver's license these days, and then they sell the data to third parties, including foreign governments. They do that. So is it really so much different? Are we at a point now where we've accepted violations of our constitutional rights for the sake of security or services? And also when it comes to maybe the more benign part of this, Palantir and so on, is it really any different from having a passport or a real ID system where there is a documentation and a database, just not accessible at a local election office? Now, like in my take, where does this all fall? I think there's always a balance when it comes to the digital space. Privacy and security, they're on a sliding scale. The more privacy you have, the less security you have. The more security you have, the less privacy you have. You need to decide which one you really want. And the other concern is when it has real-world implications, not just on the internet. The security is election security. You can have privacy or you can have security. It's a tough bet. Which do you choose? Now, it's the same thing also with freedom and safety, I would add. There's always a balance between freedom and safety. You can have both, but you can't have absolutely both because the two exist on a sliding scale. The more safety and the more guarantees of safety you have, the less freedom you're going to have. If you want to have your kid be the boy in the bubble and can't go outside to play because he might get hurt, you have a lot of safety, you don't have a lot of freedom. If you have the kid with no walls and no rules and they're allowed to do whatever the heck they want, you have a whole lot of freedom and not a whole lot of safety. So there's always a balance with these things. And again, they are on a sliding scale. On a related point, when it comes to surveillance, there's also the risk that surveillance data can be stolen and used by criminal organizations. And this is important because when we talk about these types of technologies, we're often talking about it in the normal legal sense, the use as intended. The problem with the world is that sometimes things are used not as intended. And a new case review from the Department of Justice of the Inspector General, they're bringing attention to the potential downsides of mass surveillance. When you have cameras everywhere and police can use it to enforce the law and everybody's maybe a little safer and a little less free, it notes something else. There was a case in 2018 where the Mexican cartel hired a hacker, and that hacker breached the city surveillance systems in Mexico and then used all the camera systems to track down FBI informants, people who were talking to authorities, and then kill all of them. CBS News said this: a notorious drug cartel enlisted a hacker who was able to infiltrate phone data and Mexico City's surveillance cameras to help track and kill FBI informants, the U.S. Justice Department has revealed. It notes the 2018 operation was disclosed Thursday in a 47-page audit by the Justice Department Inspector General, outlining the FBI's, quote, efforts to mitigate the effects of ubiquitous technical surveillance. In other words, if you have a network of surveillance cameras, you're creating a great power that can be used if it's in the right hands, and be used very badly if it falls into the wrong hands. So how do you stop it from falling into the wrong hands? Now, notes the partially redacted report cites a case involving Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the founder of the infamous Sinaloa drug cartel. And notes El Chapo is now serving a life sentence in a maximum security prison in the U.S. on multiple conspiracy counts for smuggling vast quantities of cocaine and other drugs into the U.S. for more than a quarter of a century. According to a newly released audit, an unnamed hacker was recruited by the cartel in 2018. The hacker, quote, observed people going in and out of the United States Embassy in Mexico City and identified people of interest for the cartel, including an FBI assistant illegal attaché, the report said. It notes as well the hacker was able to use the attaché's phone number to determine incoming and outgoing calls, as well as the FBI officials' geolocation data, according to the audit. In other words, they were able to get access to a security camera. They watched the people going into and out of a U.S. government building, the embassy, and then, of course, data on phone location is actually public. You can buy it because they sell it. Again, if you have a free product, you are the product. And unfortunately, a lot of social media systems and so on, they sell your data. They sell it. And people buy it, including criminals. And so what do? They buy the data, they can track the cell phones, and they say, okay, this cell phone is the one leaving the building at this time. That belongs to this person. Then what do? They hack it, they breach it, and they find the data on it. and they're saying, who was this person calling? In this case, they killed a lot of people. Now, the case is raising concerns over mass surveillance. Should phone tracking like this be allowed to happen? Should this type of data be viewable and purchasable by people? Should security cameras like this be just everywhere? How do you mitigate the negative effects of this? This was the focus of the review by the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General. It raised the point that mass surveillance has its benefits for security and law enforcement, but it also comes with risks. And the risk, it's not just for like authoritarian regimes. When I think mass surveillance, I'm thinking the CCP. But it can also be used for things like, human rights abuses. Look at the social credit system in China. It can also include risks from networks being breached by gangs or cartels, like we saw in Mexico. Now, on another topic also, the Department of Justice has just announced the takedown of a nearly $15 billion healthcare fraud scheme, including by foreign gangs and scammers. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. The FBI announced the takedown of a fraud ring that was stealing hundreds of millions from the U.S. healthcare system and conspiring to steal billions. This is the largest bust in DOJ history of this type, and the scandal involved 324 defendants, including many who worked in the medical field. This included global criminal networks, gangs, and so on, the buying of American health companies, and then other things where they were making fraudulent Medicare claims using these companies, or even carrying out unnecessary treatments in order to get kickbacks. There was a case, for example, where a doctor did an unnecessary skin graft on a terminal patient and did that to them before they died in order to get money from the government as a kickback. Again, fraud, harming people through the process. FBI Director Kash Patel wrote that $245 million seized, hundreds of defendants and medical professionals charged, and $15 billion in losses prevented, and the largest coordinated healthcare fraud takedown in history. Well done to all state and federal partners who pushed this. And Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino also wrote as an update, public corruption will not be tolerated as the director and I vigorously pursue bad actors who violated their oaths to all of us. Meaning, again, if you're a doctor, you take an oath to save lives. He noted, we view the theft of public funds the same way. It's a crime against all of us. Public funds, because if you're a doctor, and again, part of the way the Medicare system works, the government, again, subsidizes some of the costs at the state level. And so some doctors, if you control some of these systems, you can defraud it and get money from it. And they're saying this is, again, stealing money from the American taxpayer when it involves Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud. And he adds this, today, in conjunction with the DOJ and our federal partners, we are announcing the results from the largest healthcare fraud investigation as measured by financial losses in DOJ history. The investigation spanned 50 federal districts and resulted in nearly $3 billion in false claims, with over 15 million illegal distributions of pills. And you notice we seized $245 million. We charged 324 defendants, 96 medical professionals, and the intended losses from these bad actors approached $15 billion. Results matter, he said. Talk is cheap. And this is not even the beginning of the beginning. If you're stealing from the public or violating your oath to serve, then we're coming for you too. God bless America and all those who defend her. Now, during a press conference yesterday, law enforcement officials detailed what they declared, again, was the largest coordinated healthcare fraud takedown in the history of the Department of Justice. I'm going to show you some of that. This is Matthew Galeotto, head of the DOJ Criminal Division. Watch this.
There are 4 key points that bear emphasizing. First, let me be clear about what these healthcare fraud schemes mean for every hardworking American family. These criminals didn't just steal someone else's money. They stole from you. Every fraudulent claim, every fake billing, every kickback scheme represents money taken directly from the pockets of American taxpayers who fund these essential programs through their hard work and sacrifice. And when criminals defraud these programs, they're not just committing theft. They're driving up our national deficit and threatening the long-term viability of healthcare for seniors, disabled Americans, and our most vulnerable citizens. This enforcement action involves the seizure of cash, as well as luxury vehicles and properties, returning real money to American taxpayers and to our government healthcare programs. Second, we are seeing a disturbing trend of transnational criminal organizations engaging in increasingly sophisticated and complex criminal schemes that defraud the American healthcare system. As part of this takedown, we've identified and charged defendants operating from Russia, Eastern Europe, Pakistan, and other foreign countries. These individuals have infiltrated our healthcare system to steal American taxpayer dollars. As just one example, we dismantled a scheme involving a sophisticated operation run from Russia and Eastern Europe that strategically bought dozens of medical supply companies in the United States and submitted more than $10 billion in fraudulent healthcare claims to Medicare. To make matters worse, these perpetrators used the stolen identities of more than 1 million Americans, spanning all 50 states, to perpetrate this scheme and submit these false claims.
So my personal take on all of this, to me, this seems to fit in with what workers with the DOJ department were talking about. Remember, they were saying they identified massive amounts of Medicaid fraud, and a lot of that was coming from other countries. Remember, Elon Musk was talking about it. Some of the other employees of the DOJ administration, of the DOJ office, they were also talking about it. And what were they saying? They were saying that, well, Medicaid, the high costs of it, the problem of it running out, they were saying that basically Americans are being robbed blind. And there are gangs and false calls coming in on a massive scale. They were even saying that calls coming into the Medicaid offices making claims, the majority of those calls were fraudulent. Scammers, it's like putting a chicken in a pool of piranhas, and the chicken is the Medicaid system, and the piranhas are foreign gangs and scammers. They're just decimating our systems. And we, for the most part, just let them do it because of the way that it's so open, and we don't put checks and balances on, illegal immigrants getting it, and so scammers can also use it and other things. Now, the important thing with this, it wasn't even them just making false claims out of nothing. There were instances of medical workers even carrying out unnecessary treatments on patients so they could get kickbacks from the medical system. Even really detrimental things, as I mentioned, like a skin graft on a terminally ill patient. Imagine you only have a little bit of time left to live, and they do a skin graft on you so they can rob the Medicaid system. That's the kind of people who were doing this. And look, the finding on this is pretty important. Now, if you were to ask me also, I'd say the timing of this is probably not an accident. What is happening right now? Again, Congress, they're debating and negotiating and trying to find out what they do with the big, beautiful bill, Trump's spending package. And a big argument with that, Democrats are arguing on their part that it's going to take away Medicare and Medicaid, and it's going to cut the amount of money people get, and so on. The Trump side is saying it will not cut this. They're saying that there is so much fraud and waste that if they get rid of the fraud and waste, it'll actually free up more money for the honest people who legitimately get and need Medicare and Medicaid. And so, again, it's an argument here. Will people lose it? Yes. In particular, people who are deemed able-bodied and just plain don't feel like working. They're probably going to lose it, as will some illegal immigrants. I did see with the big beautiful bill, it seems that they're interested in still allowing some illegal immigrants to still get Medicare and Medicaid. In fact, over, I believe, 1 million of them will still be able to get it. But if they also cut out foreign scammers and so on, that's a big piece of this. I think the timing of the announcement of this investigation, right when these negotiations are taking place, I personally believe that's not an accident. I believe that it's to show that the Medicare and Medicaid system is just being, just decimated by fraudsters. And I think that's meant to be part of the push to have this thing passed, the way I interpret it at least. We'll see what happens on the point of the big, beautiful bill. They're still negotiating it. But again, parts are being kept, some are being removed. And so we'll see what comes out in the end. On another topic, though, there was a recent shooting in Idaho. A suspect allegedly started a fire, waited for emergency response to show up, and then shot firefighters when they responded. This individual killed 2 firefighters, wounded several others, and then allegedly killed himself before police could reach him. It's not clear what the motives are. It seems the individual was mentally disturbed and had a long record of that. The case is raising concerns, though, over something else, which is another growing trend, which is people are being turned against law enforcement and first responders. And as they're being even radicalized in some cases to believe that they should target them and believe that they're the bad guys and believe that there's something just in going against them, this is bringing attention to the growing risks, in particular against ICE agents, Immigration Customs Enforcement, as they move to carry out arrests and deportations. There are people doxing them, releasing their private information. There are people threatening them. There are people blocking them. There are people assaulting them. And a lot of them are now concerned. Well, are people being radicalized with these types of narratives? The acting director of ICE, Todd Lyons, recently posted a video warning about these threats and also addressed the campaign of trying to force ICE agents to not cover their faces when they carry out operations. A big thing right now, by the way, one of the big debates in the U.S., there are ICE agents, when they carry out operations, they cover their faces. When it comes to the media, a lot of the big corporate media, they're making this one of their frontline narratives. They're saying masked individuals shoving people in unmarked, masked individuals with federal agency markings on their clothes. Instead of calling them ICE agents, that's how they describe them. They make them sound like criminals. And that's the narrative right now. That's the narrative they're pushing. And so when it comes to ICE and their arguments on why they're doing it, this is what they're saying. Watch.
My officers and agents are enforcing immigration law. They are not secret police. They are not Nazis. But people hiding behind keyboards are demonizing them. They're doxing them, stirring up anti-ICE settlement, and putting their lives and their family lives at risk.
Because you guys are all about territory, and this is 18th Street, and this is Sorensen. You guys tag everything up, claiming hood. And now that your hood's being invaded by the biggest gang there is, they're gonna peep out at you.
You can kill them. This isn't about social media clout anymore. This isn't about video. This isn't about the phone. This is about get a gun and start killing ICE agents.
Wouldn't you wear a mask if it kept your family safe? If it kept your kids safe? We ran an operation with the Secret Service where we arrested someone that was going online, taking their photos, posting their families, their kids' Instagram, their kids' Facebooks, and targeting them. So let me ask, is that the issue here, that we're just upset about the masks? Or is anyone upset with the fact that ICE officers' families were labeled terrorists?
Now, there have been other issues like this. The Trump administration, they've been criticizing a recent tool that alerts people on the locations of ICE agents. Something people can download on their phones. They can report ICE agents, hey, I saw them here. And people can also use it to, avoid arrest or even target them. That's the concern. Part of it is that, while this could block agents from doing their jobs, the other side is this could be a risk to the lives and the safety of the agents themselves. And part of the administration pushback against this was a recent CNN report about the app. They criticized CNN for interviewing the guy who made this app. ICE said this. They said, statement from ICE Acting Director Todd M. Lyons on news coverage of ICE spotting app. CNN's promotion, he says, of an ICE spotting app is reckless and irresponsible. And he adds that advertising an app that basically paints a target on federal law enforcement officers' backs is sickening. He said, my officers and agents are already facing a 500% increase in assaults, and going on live television to announce an app that lets anyone zero in on their location is like inviting violence against them with a national megaphone. They said CNN is willfully endangering the lives of officers who put their lives on the line every day and enabling dangerous criminal aliens to evade U.S. law. Is this simply reckless journalism or overt activism? A big question there. I think on CNN's part, they'd say, look, we're just journalists and we're just interviewing people. And interviewing someone does not necessarily mean that we're, pushing for something. I think others would argue that there's a difference between, as the ICE acting director says, journalism or activism, that there is responsible journalism and irresponsible journalism, but there's also the issue of activism. When someone is obviously interested on one side or the other of an issue, and they're doing things with the intent of trying to have an effect. Now, on that point also, I recently reported the Trump administration, they're planning to enforce large daily fines against illegal immigrants who do not self-deport. And by the way, a lot of them are self-deporting. In fact, over 1 million already, allegedly at least. And on that point also, they're planning to fine people retroactively. And this is the answer to a big question, which is, well, what about people who've been here 15 years or 20 years or even longer? The message from the Trump administration is this. If you've been here 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, every single day that you had a removal order and you did not self-deport, you were violating the law. And so the argument from them is that it does not make you legal. It actually makes you more of a criminal the longer you've been violating that for. That's the argument they're saying. And with these fines, people are getting massive, massive fines if they've been here a long time. And the program for this, it's now official. Department of Homeland Security has now officially announced it. They've expanded it. This is what they said. They say the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, announced a new joint federal rule with the Department of Justice, DOJ, that will make it easier and more efficient to fine illegal aliens. The current process, they said, requires giving illegal aliens 30 days notice of the intent to fine them before a fine is issued. This new rule will eliminate the 30-day notice period. They don't got to tell you no more, at least not 30 days ahead of time. And they said as well, it will authorize DHS immigration officers to send fines to illegal aliens by regular mail and shorten the process that applies if illegal aliens contest their fines. So they just can mail it to you, and your ability to challenge it is much reduced. They said this, quote, the law doesn't enforce itself. There must be consequences for breaking it, said Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, and added President Trump and Secretary Noem are standing up for law and order and making our government more effective and efficient at enforcing the American people's immigration laws. Financial penalties like these are just one more reason why illegal aliens should use CBP Home, the app they've created. It used to be CBP One, now it's CBP Home, to, quote, self-deport now before it's too late. They note as well the new process will be applied to aliens who enter the United States illegally, aliens who ignore removal orders or delay the removal, aliens who do not honor agreements to comply with judges' voluntary departure orders. And it notes that fines include this: $100 to $500 per unlawful entry or attempted entry, $1,992 to $9,970 for failure to honor a voluntary departure order, up to $998 per day for willfully failing to comply with a removal order. So every time they illegally cross, they were fined. Every time they violate this, they're fined. And every single day that they do not self-deport, they're fined even retroactively. And why is that a big deal? Well, the administration basically, they've already given these removal orders to almost every illegal alien in the country. That means that the need to inform them has already been done. They've given removal orders to every single illegal alien. All of them now are risking these fines. And some of that is even more direct, like groups, for example, that were given temporary protection status but then had that revoked. With the revocation of that, they're told to use CBP Home, self-deport. Every one of those people has now effectively been put on alert to self-deport, meaning that stage of it has already been done. And there are already people reporting they're getting large amounts of money, fines, if they had removal orders going back even 10 years or more. You have people saying, look, I've been here for 15 years, 20 years, I have kids here and so on. And the federal government is actually hitting them with fines, arresting them, and the fines are massive. Because what they're doing is, if they had a removal order 15 years ago, they're putting retroactive fines of $500 to $998 for every single day they did not deport themselves. This is massive. Now, we'll see what the effect is. I think the push for this is to actually, well, probably two sides to it. One is they need to find ways to cover the costs of deporting people. It costs roughly $17,000 for every person they deport. The airplane ticket cost, the processing cost, the cost of law enforcement. It costs them about $17,000 for every single person that they deport. If they need money for that, well, they can now take it from the individuals through fines. This could cover the costs of it. The other side is this works as an incentive to push for self-deportation. Because the risk people are now facing is very large fines, the loss of all of your assets possibly, and also that if you don't self-deport, you might never be able to come back to the United States, including if you have family here. So it's a big deal. That said, questions, comments, leave them in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion, folks. First off, JNS21970. You're saying, how much are you tracked by electronic surveillance each day, just from the supermarket to your home? A lot. Let's go over it, okay? There's now studies coming out in terms of how emitted technologies like Wi-Fi can even have a visualization element to it. The schizophrenics have been vindicated because it turns out that, yes, this is true. Basically, what they found is this. There are patents for it, registering it. Hackers have demonstrated the ability to do it. If you're in an environment where there is Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi works as an emitted technology. And if you use multiple Wi-Fi points, they can create 3D image replications of an environment. They can see inside your home. They can see how many people there are in your home. They can get a general idea of what you're doing. And let me ask you a question. If you turn on your phone right now and you look for open Wi-Fi signals or just in general, how many do you see? Do you see more than one? Do you ever not see more than one? Well, that means I don't know if it's being used, but there is the constant ability of having that type of surveillance done at every single moment, including when you're in the otherwise privacy of your own home. If you've downloaded a social media app or basically any app on your phone and you've granted them access to something, that is probably being sold. At the very least, it's viewable by the company you gave it to. It's not just being sold to advertisers, it's being sold oftentimes to governments and even foreign governments, or even to private businesses, which in turn sell it to different governments, meaning all around the world, not even just here, you're at risk of surveillance. And that can include a lot of things. That can include your voice, including when you're not talking on your phone. Your phone actually can monitor voices even when you're not actively using it. Again, audio access. It could include video access. You're sitting at your computer and you have your Wi-Fi camera on, things like that, usually more like your phone. It includes your contact lists, your messages, your notes even, especially if you're using an online application that is a free service, meaning you're the product, that allows you to write things. All of that, of course, is viewable, able to be monitored, and accessible and sellable. And so there are risks like this basically with everything. Every phone call, every movement, every video call, everything is surveilled. Again, and part of that is just by private companies. But when you deal with public-private partnerships, there's a lot more to it. And even that's not even just all of it. Look, for example, at Wi-Fi, at surveillance cameras, as JNS2 noted. In the supermarket, what happens now if a crime is committed? What happens? They release surveillance footage of the suspect, and they can even trace the suspect as viewed on multiple different surveillance cameras. The individual bought a coffee here. The individual was seen driving here. The individual was seen walking here. The individual did this and that. Everything is viewable. Has anybody ever seen, like the basic systems that law enforcement has, the computers they have? Do you know the kind of information it can give? This is not even like the high-tech stuff. This is your basic law enforcement stuff. If they have those computers, if they type in the basic information on a person, do you know what they access? It shows not only your general information, where you live, your car, your license plate, all that stuff, your criminal history, identifiable features, basic biometrics if available, fingerprints and so on. It also includes different online aliases. What different usernames do you use on the internet? It can even show the different emails you've created. So you have X number of emails. Those emails are registered on X number of websites. What are all the fake names you use, your online internet names? They can see all of that. All of that is viewable. And what does that mean? It means everything you've ever written or done on the internet using any of those email accounts, using any of those names, could hypothetically be searchable and usable against you, either for doxing or personal attacks or for basically anything. And again, I'm not just talking about law enforcement. I'm just talking about even like the social attacks and cancel culture and companies buying and selling stuff. And if you go further down the line, something I'm glad did not fully happen, even the abilities of private companies to cancel you. One issue the Trump administration has brought up is what they call debanking, where banks were even canceling people's accounts for political reasons. Hey, you spoke about a topic and you had an opinion that we deem socially ill, and so we're not going to let you bank anymore. That has already been happening. And so this is the reality we've created for ourselves, unfortunately. Now, on that point, I hope we can turn the clock back, personally. Do you know the cure for all of this? You buy a newspaper, and you go and build a garden, and you get some chickens and a dog, and suddenly none of this means anything. You know what I mean? The real world is still there, and it's still very nice and pleasant. So enjoy reality as well. Touch grass, as the kids might say, right? California gal, you're saying our state assemblywoman sent an email giving us information on what to do if ICE knocks on our door, how to recognize a true warrant, etc. I thought it crossed a line. Yeah, actually, I was actually going to include that today. That happened in a few different parts of the United States. I believe there was a case in Rhode Island where the city council sent out information like that. There have also been individual public officials who sent out things like that. And what they're doing is this. They're sending out information to just people in general, telling them how to avoid arrest by ICE. So they're saying, you know, if ICE knocks at your door, what do you do? If ICE stops you on the road, what do you do? And they're giving people tips on how to not get arrested and deported. Why is that problematic? Well, I will see, because maybe this might have to go to court eventually. The Trump administration, Tom Homan and so on, you know, the border czar, they're saying this represents a type of interference with the carrying out of justice. That this could actually represent blocking federal agents from doing their job. I do know that you're allowed to know your rights, but there are restrictions on educating people about how to avoid being arrested or prosecuted. It's a real fine line. It's a real fine line. If you educate people, if you educate a criminal on how to avoid being caught, you do risk criminal charges. I don't know about the actual enforcement of that. I don't really hear cases of that being enforced, but I have heard cases where people do warn about it, that you need to be careful about giving criminals advice on avoiding authorities. And so that's one of the issues being brought up right now with different officials and so on, or even private organizations. There's a lot of NGOs doing this as well. Telling people how to avoid arrest. Does that constitute interfering with law enforcement? Does that constitute giving material support, right? They would call that material support to criminals. And I think that, in my understanding of the law, that would be the one they'd probably use on that. You sent them a mailer, you sent them a document, you sent them something that is material support specifically to tell someone who is probably guilty how to avoid the law, right? That would, I think, be the charge if they ever enforce it. They might enforce it, but we'll have to see, because they typically don't, right? TZ Burton, you're saying this fraud is probably only a fraction. You're talking about the Medicaid fraud. You're saying, I listened to an American podcaster who lives in Colombia, and he said he has met people who collect benefits who have never even been to the U.S. Yeah, that is also one of the problems of our ridiculously open Medicaid system. Okay, I've had people send me stuff on this before, and it's true. The reason I don't really move on is because it's true and it's known. There are several ways that people defraud the American system from foreign countries. You have people living off of welfare on the American taxpayer's back in third world countries, in just random countries, in Russia and other countries that don't have extradition treaties with the United States. And what they do is this. Well, there's a lot of things they do. One is they set up fake entities. For example, with the Medicaid fraud case, there were people buying or creating fake medical companies and then just writing fake claims. So, you buy a medical company and you claim that you're carrying out health care, and every time you carry out a procedure which might not even exist, you document that, and then you send a claim to Medicare or Medicaid, and they reimburse you using federal funds. That when it came to that big case they just busted, that was one of the main forms of fraud they just busted. Another part of it involves people using stolen identities. Stealing identities is a massive problem. A lot of illegal aliens, when they come here, a lot of them, what they do certain jobs require you to have a social security number. There have been some exceptions made to this because there are some people who want to allow illegal immigrants to still pay taxes, fine. But a lot of workplaces require you to have a social security number. And so there are shops set up that just sell stolen identities. They commit identity fraud where they steal that. There are systems even, according to Elon Musk, people even are able to reuse the same social security number multiple times. And so there are you could argue, okay, there are people stealing the IDs, but on the other side of it, what does that mean? It means there's a market to steal and sell stolen identities. You've all heard of identity fraud or identity theft, that there's a market for it. Gangs, criminal organizations, they do this. And they don't just sell it to people working here illegally. They sell it to people in other countries who want to use the stolen identities to defraud the American system. And as T.Z. Burton said, some of them use those stolen identities to get taxpayer benefits, to defraud Medicare or Medicaid, to get unemployment. Some of them, they even call in. Let's say, for example, you're an elderly woman, right? And you live paycheck to paycheck. You need your Medicare, Medicaid, you get food stamps, and then someone steals your identity. And then what they do when they find your information, maybe they steal it from a website, they know your age, they know your disabilities, they know your social security number, they know where you live. What do? They call the government agency that handles all of these things. They give them your information, and then they change the address where your benefits are mailed to, and they steal the money that you need to survive. And there are a lot of people who are victimized like this. I don't know how widespread this fraud is. I can tell you, as an investigative journalist over the years, I have a lot of people who've mailed me letters begging for help, saying this is happening to me. The problem is it's known that it happens, just nothing gets done about it, and until now. And so finally this is being brought to the surface. Finally there's something maybe being done about it. But this has been a big problem for a very long time. America, on almost every front, is the global sugar daddy. America is the global... I should rephrase that. The American taxpayer is the global sugar daddy. We prop up the defense budgets of other countries so they can have free health care. We prop up the welfare systems of other countries so they just don't have to work. God bless their hearts. We prop up the quality of life in a lot of countries, actually, through social services. We are the providers of the global welfare state in many regards, whether through legal or illegal means. People either getting it through bad trade deals or defense deals, or just through plain old fraud. And there is a big problem that's going to come about when mama's milk stops flowing, let's say, right? And so things are about to change. We'll see what happens when that happens, but a lot of that's being cut off now. Ashley from California is saying, I have a simple solution. Require real ID for voting. No new anything needed. Yeah, and there are arguments for it. I've also heard some arguments against real ID. I know that there are, even among conservatives, and I know especially among libertarians, a lot of people they don't necessarily like real ID. They view it as a type of surveillance, right? I know I've seen even some libertarian groups warning about there's like services at the airports where you can skip the line. There are some arguments that I haven't looked into it, but I know there are libertarian groups warning that if you sign up for some of those programs, you surrender some of your privacy rights, and they're worried about that. I've heard some of the same arguments about Real ID. Now, again, security and privacy exist on a sliding scale on the digital front, just like in the public sphere. When you're out in the open, freedom and safety exist on a sliding scale. And I think there is a very real argument to make people have voter ID. I like the idea of voter ID. I'd actually say if you look at polling data, it's actually not partisan. Republicans and Democrats and independents overwhelmingly support voter ID. But when it comes to politics, it's very partisan. A lot of people on the left side of the aisle, they're very much against it. They say that it will disenfranchise voters. A lot of conservatives are very much for it because they say it will prevent fraud. The argument is, do you think fraud is widespread enough to justify that? That is the question, right? Yeah, I don't know. Again, I personally, if you were to ask my personal belief, I like the idea of voter ID. Is Real ID the solution to it? I would need to look more deeply into the claims I've heard warning about privacy issues with Real ID. Maybe a passport or a driver's license, if they could make sure that illegal immigrants are not getting driver's licenses, or if they could compare the records, that would be enough. Or if they were to create a citizenship verification just on the driver's license front, I think that would be enough. But I don't know. We'll see where they go with it. MS Foster 2015 is saying, Josh, what do you make of the recent CISA cyber attack warning? Joint statement from CISA, FBI, DC3, and NSA on potential targeted cyber activity against U.S. critical infrastructure by Iran. Yeah, so there is a big concern right now that Iran is going to launch a counterattack against the United States. The problem Iran has is their options of a counterattack are limited. They said they were going to bomb our bases, our military bases, and they were going to close down the Strait of Hormuz. The problem with that, well, the Strait of Hormuz would mostly only hurt them. That's like a robber coming into a bank and saying, nobody move or I shoot myself in the foot. I'll blow my own foot off if anybody does anything. I'll do it. Because most of the oil that goes through there is their own oil, and it goes to China, not the United States. America does not get much oil through the Strait of Hormuz. It would also impact countries like Qatar and so on. The only way that would actually affect America would be if that caused a price spike for the Chinese market, because that's what it would affect. And then all the other companies raise their prices because they're vampires and they want to suck your blood. That would be the only thing that happened. The Trump administration told those other oil companies, don't spike your prices just to make more money. You know what I mean? That was the message. So that never happened. On the attacking bases front, what did Iran do? They did not want to actually start a war with us, so they told us ahead of time. And then Trump told the entire world that they did that and then made fun of them for it by calling the attack weak. Trump actually made fun of them publicly and revealed the thing that normally you keep secret, which is it was just for show. They just did it for show. You're supposed to keep that part quiet, right? Trump said the quiet part out loud and then teased them about it. Now the question is, will they do something else? Well, maybe that's going to be a cyber attack. Maybe that's going to be a cyber attack because that's kind of the only other thing they could do. And what does that mean? Well, look, I mean, for American citizens, like, what are you going to do? Okay, everybody, be aware that you need to protect the electric grid. Okay, I guess I'll go stand in front of it. Okay, like what do I do? Do I go like lay on a solar panel to try to stop the signals from coming in? Like, there's not a lot we can do about it. right? As individuals, there's nothing we can do. And so this has to come down to like, the security systems and businesses and stuff like that. They're the ones who would have to be more alert to this. In my opinion, the value of having public alerts go out like this, though, is it basically tells the country that would launch the attack, we're watching you, and we know if something happens that you did it. We know you're planning to do it. And if you do it, we might bomb you again, right? Or we might put sanctions on you or something like that. It's kind of being like, okay, we know you're planning to rob this bank at 3 p.m. today. We're going to arrest you if you do it. Like, don't do it, dude. It's not smart. Just don't do it. And so, in my opinion, that's why they're making that public statement. All right, everyone, that said, let me know in the chat what you think. Do you think Real ID is the solution to the voting issue? Do you think that ID is even necessary? Do you think that there's not enough of a problem to warrant it? Do you think that Africa and Afghanistan are racist for requiring people to have a voter ID? Do you think that people are not capable of getting an ID to vote? Is this in fact discrimination? Let me know in the comments. Also, I'm curious, on a serious note, what do you think about the Palantir thing? Do you support it? Do you think this could be used for other things? Do you like the idea of a national database on American citizens like this? Yes, it could be argued there's some good uses for it. Do you think that the negatives outweigh that? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious what you all think. That said, joining me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Do not forget to hit the like button. It helps us a lot. And that said, I will see you tomorrow. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.